Hi guys, this is Dona and welcome to another episode of BTMA's Maruthuvar on Call Real Take. Today I have a really special guest here with me, Dr. Veena Babu. She has kindly come in after working to talk about some good, insightful comments on diet and exercise in the South Asian community, which we're all excited to hear about. Hi Veena.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm good. How was work?
Work was very good. Yeah.
Okay, okay, that's
You
good.
always have to take a deep breath when you're talking about work. Yeah.
Not too tiresome?
No.
Okay, so I've been following you on Instagram. I know that you do amazing, brilliant work apart from working as a doctor. But for people who don't know, can you just tell us a little bit more about what you do and what kind of doctor you are?
Sure. Thank you, Donna. That's really kind. I am a GP by profession, but I also do some media work, advocacy work, and I used to teach dance regularly as well before. And since the last 2 years, I run a South Asian focused charity called Sada.
Okay. So you've been working as a GP. Has that inspired you to kind of think about this South Asian community going like long-term chronic management?
No. The truth is, no, that's not what happened. So working in primary care, you are the first port of call for all concerns, right? You see patients cradle to grave. You see things that training never prepared you for. You see things that actually teach you more than 6 years at medical school. So it's very complex. I love the complexity. I love the uncertainty. I love the fact that you can see patients over and over. So GP is great. For anyone considering it, please do consider it. That's not what made me want to focus on South Asians. I lost my mother, actually, to complications of diabetes, coming up to 2.5 years ago now. And after she passed, I remember going back to work. It was a clinic, and I don't know what it was about that clinic. Every patient was pretty much a similar profile. South Asian woman, mid-50s, mid-60s, HbA1c through the roof, cholesterol through the roof. And when you try to open a dialogue with them, it would just be, oh, I have a bit of sugar, I have a bit of diabetes. And that's when it hit me. A lot of people know you can live with diabetes, but I don't think a lot of people know you can die with it. And that's where, when I went back and looked at the number and the data, there wasn't anything focused on our community. Of course, there's diabetes.uk, and there are lots of bigger organizations that look at the entire UK. But I think what the South Asian community needs is someone who looks like them, sounds like them, speaks their language, and talks about food and behavior that can be applicable to them. So that's where the passion began. And SADA stands for the South Asian Diabetes Association in memory of Helen. And Helen was my mom. So that's where it began.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think when you have that personal experience to guide you on this amazing journey to educate South Asians who are living in the UK, which is a multicultural country, where there's actually lack of resources, I think that's amazing. You've been doing amazing work, and you're going to continue doing so much more. So talking of the diet and fitness, what do you think is the main problem that is like basically the barrier in tackling this in South Asian community?
It's a great question, Donna. Thank you for asking me this question. I think we really need to reframe how we look at movement and exercise. We need to stop looking at it as punishment. It cannot be something that is a chore that you have to drag yourself to do, right? Any muscle, the more you train it with movement, with increased load, it gets strong. You get stronger muscles, stronger joints, stronger flexibility. And what does that really mean? It means you can live not just longer, you can live a better quality of life. You reduce your visceral fat over time. Muscle is heavier than fat. It consumes more energy, it burns more calories. You're going to have a less kind of outcome of chronic conditions, inflammation, certain cancers that are also driven by adipose tissue, which research now shows. So there are so many benefits. So I think we need to change the way we look at movement in our community. I have patients who come and tell me, I work 10 hours, 12 hours at work. Doctor, that's exercise. And I have to tell them that's not exercise. That just means you have an active lifestyle, right? So exercise is when you're doing something for 20 minutes or more, where you get a bit out of breath, your heart rate increases, and you kind of work up a sweat. Your heart is a muscle. Any muscle, you have to train it to the point of kind of exhaustion or tiredness to make it a bit stronger. And that's the key. So even if you do 20 minutes, 3 times a week, 5 times a week to start with, that's what you need to do. So with movement, that's the key. As South Asians, we genetically have lower muscle mass, women and men, right? So women, especially in your 30s, 40s, one of the best things you can do is weight train. I'm not talking about like 50 kilogram weights, right? Start with 5 kilograms, start with any resistance training. You're going to see the benefits, not today or tomorrow, but in your 40s, in your 50s. And that's the key, like when it comes to movement, especially. Yeah.
I'm really glad you talked about the weight training, because there's plenty of evidence that shows the benefits, especially for women.
Yeah.
But I think I think another issue is that everybody has different life experiences and different responsibilities, I should say. So let's say a mom who is like 50, 55-year-old, who might be a bit obese, who might have diabetes, who might be a housewife, hasn't really been having that exposure compared to, let's say, a 25-year-old who is an active businesswoman or having an active work life, who is going to gym regularly. They might not see the same view of the weight training. How would you tackle that?
I will tell you this, that if you don't make time for health today, you're going to make time for illness tomorrow. You could have 100 problems until you have a health problem, then you have one problem. So you could be as busy as, and this again comes back to the mindset, right? You don't have to always go to the gym. While your food is cooking, you could be in the living room with a skipping rope, getting your heart rate up. It literally is that simple. You could try and do planks to see, can you hold your own body weight? Forget weights. Can you actually hold your own weight? Can you do a seated, a simple sit to stand? Can you do like a simple squat just with your body weight? Those are the things you can start with. And if you want, we can talk about different sequences and different things. And this is the stuff we work in the community with these groups to show them it's not punishment, shouldn't be a challenge, and it should actually empower you, because you're going to get stronger, you're going to have more energy to be with your family and your children, and you're just going to see such improved outcomes. It's a win-win for everyone.
Fear of being judged, fear of being feeling like if they start looking after themselves, having self-care, they might be perceived as they're not having a good family responsibility, which I think does exist in especially South Asia.
I would say it's 2025. I think we should be more judgmental if you're not taking care of your health. Society's changing. There's a big shift. The woman is the pinnacle and the cornerstone of a household. And I'm just focusing on women here for a second. If the woman is healthy, those choices, not just in terms of nutrition, financially, economically, it can shape an entire household, right? It makes a big difference. That's what they're going to teach their kids. That's what they're going to teach to their friends. Their extended family is going to observe that. And it literally starts with simple things. Maybe saying no to that second portion of dessert, maybe having smaller portions of the food, swapping white rice for brown rice. When you make dosa, instead of using white batter, using brown batter, little things like that go a long way. And some practical tips, Donna, that people can do is try with one change. So it takes 21 days to kind of get a change incorporated into your lifestyle. Start with one thing. In about 2 to 3 weeks, assess, is that working for me? And then maybe add another thing. You don't have to overnight give up everything and punish yourself, because that's not what this is about. And I think with our community, what happens, and I've seen this, when I say our community, with Sada, we've worked with Gujarati communities, Tamil communities, Malayali communities. People often wait until disease or illness to make the change. And our work is, let's make the change today when we have the energy, when you have that effort. And so we never see that door of disease, like type 2 diabetes, unless it's because of another chronic condition, technically should not exist. It's a lifestyle disease, right? You know this. And I think once people understand that you can reverse that, but the moment you touch upon insulin, you're not going to be able to reverse that. So the moment you're pre-diabetic, it's a time to take a step back and really think, okay, what do I need to change in my life? I do not want to end up diabetic. Yeah.
I know that a lot of the food can be demonized, especially in the South Asian population, where we kind of almost stereotype, okay, it's a lot of sweets, it's a lot of biryani. Of course, just go back to Mediterranean salad. But I mean, I do eat salad, but I don't give up biryani. I can't do that. And I'm, in my 20s. So how can I expect my parents or grandparents who've been eating that for so many years to kind of just stop all of that and eat salad? How would you tackle that issue in terms of the diet?
Firstly, do not give up biryani. I wouldn't want anyone to give it up. It's one of our favorite, most amazing cuisines. And this is it. You've hit the nail on the head. If there's a particular group of society that have been eating and living a certain way for 50 to 60 years, you can't overnight tell them to now eat grilled kale. It's not going to happen. So I think we have to really take a step back and look at what we're consuming and making changes. So like we said, using small amounts of ghee, maybe not using excessive white sugar, using brown sugar, refined sugar, or completely skipping the sugar. These are like in some of the sweet dals that you make. Switching up white carbs for brown carbs because they take longer to process, they're longer chain carbohydrates. Making those small changes, incorporating a few more veggies that aren't very oily. So have your biryani, but maybe have like a grilled salad on the side. Cut down the portion of what you're eating. And maybe don't eat those heavy foods every day of the week. Another practical thing is if 5 or 6 days you can eat quite lean and clean, then the 1 or 2 days, if you're going to indulge, it's fine, right? It's all about balance and moderation. The problem happens where if you're consuming these high calorie meals 3 times a day, 7 days a week, and on top of that, not expending that energy with exercise, where is it going? It's going around your waist, around your organs, around your vessels. You're going to get blood clots, you're going to get strokes, your joints are going to give way, you're going to get arthritis. We could be here all day talking about this.
I think that's a really important point that you raised about how to adapt the diet of a certain population, because I've been in discussion with few doctors where they kind of just say, okay, you shouldn't be having bread, you shouldn't be having pasta. And these are the kinds of health tactics and demonization of food that you kind of project onto other population, and then what happens is you kind of just look at the HbA1c, okay, let's up the insulin without actually, are you really doing anything to help?
But we have some excellent ingredients in our diet. All our food cannot be demonized. Like look at all the antioxidants in turmeric, in chili, in cayenne pepper, in cumin seeds. All the lentils are high in protein. There is so much goodness in our food. It's just about tapering it a little bit with portion, cutting out the excess oils, and changing the carbohydrate you consume. I think that's just the key. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's so important to have that awareness as doctors, as students, because actually we're going to be seeing these patients. It doesn't matter if you're in GP or hospital, you're going to be seeing diabetes, you're going to be seeing South Asians everywhere. So it's something that should be on the back of our minds.
So there was a recent study published that said by 2050, I think over 70% of the world is going to be obese, right? So this is not just going to be the endocrinologist problem, this is going to be all of our problem in the medical community. So any opportunity you have in any consultation, be it a follow-up, a results, if you could encourage, and this has to be done correctly, right? It's not about judging, it's not about making someone feel bad, it's about empowering them with knowledge. So even when I see patients, I say, look, we look at this as data collection. Let's look at the data and now let's take action. Because what can't be measured, if you don't measure something, you can't improve it, right? So we measure it, we improve it, we come back and see how do we optimize this further. And that's the partnership, I think, that really needs to happen in medicine. Yeah.
And then in terms of the SADA, what are some of the most important work that you've been doing?
Well, something we're really excited to share with you that we're working on now, the Southern Above and Chain, we've partnered with them and we're working on developing a few dishes for a healthy menu that's going to be on Wednesdays. And it's going to be focused around diabetics. So I'm actually in the testing kitchen tomorrow to work on some things. And it's really exciting because to think that something stemmed from an idea, to now sit down with chefs and nutritionists and their produce managers discussing this, and we're doing it for our community, is actually, it's a really nice feeling. Yeah.
In terms of, I know you mentioned that you're working with chefs to work out the healthy recipes. So how do you work with them? Like, where did you work with nutritionists, or you kind of did your own research? How did that come about?
So I had the data points for certain ingredients that we were trying to amend. And we looked at the research, worked with the nutritionist, and I took that to the chef, said, this is what we're working with. What can we do with the menu? And then it's been a whole process from there. It's been trial and error. How can we source things, ingredients, costings? It's a whole another conversation. Yeah, it's been a learning process, but it's been really exciting. Yeah,
sounds like an amazing project, and I mean, in the future, it could be replicated in loads of branches, loads of restaurants as well.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's more so when you start the dialogue, they may have an idea. Why don't we steam that? Why don't we add this vegetable? But then we have to think of, is that going to change the color? Is that going to change the base flavor? Are they going to still want to get a second? What do we do with the leftover product for the mornings? Can we make breakfast with that same ingredient that we serve for dinner? So there's a lot to think about in the chain, like the chain process. Yeah.
And apart from this, have you been working with like patients directly as well in terms of Sada?
Yes. So a big part of the work we do for Sada is we go to places of worship. It's predominantly been gurudwaras, churches, a couple of mosques, where we hold diabetes kind of wellness circuits. I want to call them circuits. And we've collaborated with like the Lions Association. So a circuit would be, while the patients come there to worship and, do their duties, on the way out, they might just want to come into the circuit. And it's always in a designated area. So we do their weight, height, like so BMI, blood pressure, may do a BM if they are on hypoglycemics, I mean. And then at the end, they'll sit with the doctor, we'll go through the numbers and really talk to them about things. And then there's a bit of a food chart and an exercise chart. So it's more just starting the conversation with them and seeing where they are. Yeah. And the response has been very interesting depending on which part of London we do it, because the challenges are very varied depending on where it's been. Yeah.
Do you use like a translator, or do you have like different people speaking different language in your organization to reach out?
So we don't use an interpreter. We have community leads. So within Sada, we have 5 community leads. So Gujarati, Bengali, Malayali, Tamil, and Sikh community. So they're always there, but often people speak English. And there's the good thing about South Asians is if you speak one language, you can kind of understand. So I speak Hindi, so I can speak to the ones who speak Urdu or Punjabi because it's a bit similar. Or if you speak Malayalam, I can understand Tamil.
Yeah.
Konjam, right? So you can get away with a few things, yeah.
What advice would you give to doctors going into GP or even actually anywhere to kind of, deal with this kind of diabetic South Asian management?
I would say the future of medicine is personalized healthcare. You can't be treating a number. You have to look at the patient as a whole. And unless you can really build that trust with the patient, they're not going to adhere to change. They're not going to do anything. So you have to really listen to what they're saying and make them feel heard. You can't come from a place of judgment. And often with chronic disease and diabetes, it's never just one thing. It affects multiple systems. You have to look at their heart health, their bone health, their gut health. If they're women, their hormones. Are they perimenopausal? Are they menopausal? Like there's so much to think about. So I would just say general practice is excellent if you're thinking about it. There are a lot of challenges, but the scope of what you can do with your career, I have learned in the last few years, is honestly immeasurable. But when you look at a patient, don't treat a number, treat the person and have a holistic funnel view. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure you've, given so much inspiration to a lot of us to even, the next time we see a patient, just taking a few minutes to just look at the patient as a patient.
But it's exhausting, right? And I know that, and I can appreciate that. And have you seen a lot of patients like this, Dona?
When I did GP community, I did see quite a few patients because where I worked, it was quite South Asian predominant.
Did you get tired?
Well. Sometimes it gets, when you're trying to deal with something else, then it's very difficult to go into this topic.
And it's 10 minutes, it's pressured, and it's exhausting because you're doing the same thing over and over and over. But you can't lose hope because it could be that one line you say that hits home and they may make a change. And that could be like a whole domino effect. So you can't lose that kind of momentum. So I want to encourage you all to not lose that momentum because medicine really, really tests you.
Yeah, really, really tests you. Yeah. There's still a chance for you to, do something else if you're not a qualified doctor yet. And then going back to you, so apart from Sada, like you talked a little bit about dancing. Is that something that you still do now as well?
Oh, dance is my first love. For all of you who may have followed my journey, I have not actually taught a class or trained in a while, but that's because all the time I used to spend in the studio now goes into Sada. That's the truth. And some of my other work commitments take over. I do miss it, and I can't wait to be back in the studio. It initially was just a creative outlet, and that's where the journey began on YouTube. And then before I knew it, I was performing and teaching, and it brought me so much happiness, honestly.
What kind of dancing do you do?
So it was to Bollywood music, and I'm classically trained, but what I taught was a fusion. So I would teach a class called Bollyhood, which was more urban, or Bolly Fields, which was more Indian contemporary. Yeah, that's what I do.
That's also another way to, move as well, exactly what you've been saying as well.
Yeah.
So I know you do a lot of things. So beside being a doctor, how do you, manage the work-life balance and your other commitments?
I think, can I be honest? Is this unhinged?
Yes, please.
I think the work-life balance is overrated. This is my honest truth, and this is my personal opinion. I think it's hard to have it all at the same time. Something has to give. What I've learned in my experience, I'm in my 30s now, I see it as seasons, especially for students now studying, or if you're a junior doctor and you have exams, there'll be a season of hard work where you lose a bit of sleep, you have to overwork, you have to sacrifice a few things. And then there might be a season of rest where you have a few more evenings off, where you spend more time with family or your loved ones. I can't really think to a point in my adult life where I've had a balance. What society teaches you is a balance of, I go to work and I come home and I, the TikTok videos of now I'm meditating and now I'm cooking. That for me, that has never been the case. And it's fine, because what works for me works for me. So now when students ask me this question, I tell them the truth. I think you have to look at, what do you want from life? What do you want from your career? And really make a timeline and work towards it. Of course, don't burn out. You need to have 0 days or rest days, and you need to schedule it all in. And to come back to your question, how do I do it all, is I don't do it at the same time. You have seasons for each thing, and you work at different things. And then you decide, right? So it's definitely doable. If I can do it, anyone can do it. You just have to be motivated. And motivation doesn't come from some feeling. It's just a decision. It's just a decision. You turn up even when you don't want to. And that is it. That is the only differentiating factor. Yeah.
So it's about basically discipline and prioritizing what's best in that season.
Yeah. Time blocking, accepting, and really working on your mindset, because it's never one size fits all, right? Some people, if for instance, you get stressed very easily, you get anxious very easily, you may not want to overburden yourself by doing 15 things. But for someone like me, I love a challenge. I love learning something new. I love being pushed. Trying all these things actually energizes me. I don't feel tired. I feel more energetic, So you have to really learn who you are and how you work. And over time, you'll find like a norm for yourself.
That's a really good advice. Then, a lot of people, they just kind of say, okay, it's just about a balance, and no one really knows what a balance really means. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And in terms of going forward for yourself and Sada, what do you see the future to be?
Well, the future would be we eradicate type 2 diabetes from the UK South Asian diaspora. That is my goal and dream. But the truth is, I am director and I'm leading this as a side hustle at the moment. I work 45 to 50 hours a week. I have other roles that demand my time. So right now, everyone who's involved with Sada or works with Sada does it in their free time. And you're very aware that I have to cut down my working hours to then go and do this work. So there is a bit of the challenge, even to do good, there are resources needed, there are funds needed. It's not easy, and you'll understand that as well. But it's so rewarding. So we're definitely going to power through. There's going to be a lot of free exercise classes, nutrition classes. The 7 Abundant menu is going to come out, and there's going to be a lot more content-driven stuff around places of worship, because it seems to work for us, and I think that's where we can really connect with the community. Yeah.
Thank you for talking about all of that. I mean, it's been very insightful, and I'm sure people watching this would agree, and I'm sure everyone would have taken away something, and it's something that they can relate to, because I think you mentioned about starting at home, with our parents, our grandparents, our aunts and uncles, and thinking the patients in their shoes. So that's something that would help us to go forward in eradicating diabetes. So thank you so much for sharing all of those insights, Veena. So next we're going to talk about some interesting patients that we can kind of learn from that you've seen in primary care. Is there anything that comes to your mind?
Yes, there are a couple of really unique cases that I want to tell you about, actually. So I was a newly qualified GP. I had this patient who was in his early 40s, presented with non-specific left-sided abdominal pain. So you examined, it was not peritonitic, it was an acute emergency, SATs and OBS were fine. All the blood markers were fine. CRP was not raised. White cells were not raised. We did a FIT test. We did a calprotectin. There was no blood when we checked physical exam or in any of the special tests. We just didn't know what to do. And he kept coming back, and he presented twice in 1 week, then the next week, and then the next month. Ultrasound abdomen didn't show anything. I think there were no psychological factors. There were no mental health concerns. There was no trauma.
And all the tests,
a fit 42-year-old, all the tests came back negative. Yeah. No systemic signs, no weight loss, no change in appetite, no night sweats, no lymph nodes that were enlarged, nothing like that, no recent travel abroad. It was really, it wasn't your typical, and he was a very well-educated, well-read person. It's not someone who would just present with symptoms unnecessarily. He'd come to the doctor, rarely. So that was that. We then referred him. He wanted to be seen privately by a gastroenterologist. So we referred on. They did a CT abdomen. And what they found was shrapnels of lead in the colon that were just there. And then we went back to speak to him. And we asked him, how is there, what do you like doing in your spare time? Turns out he was a big hunter who would hunt game, and then they would eat it. So pheasants, which are birds that people go and hunt for leisure, and happened to be that even though when you clean it out and take the bullets out, there must have been some part of that bullet that was left in the bird that got cooked, that this person ate, and a small piece of that bullet is now in their colon, causing them like these symptoms. And you just think, it's not something you would typically think of your differential. So that was really interesting. Even he was like, oh, darn. Like he was very, like, what do we do with this pain? So then I think there were discussions about, should we just observe and maybe try some neuropathic medication? But because it was lead and it wasn't easily something you could just surgically excise, I think the consultant made a plan of watch and wait for a couple of weeks. And if not, they were going to surgically go in and see before there were any risks of perforation. I think the key there is, when all the tests make no sense, go back to the history. Go back to the history and pick up things about work and social life and what they do in their spare time, or have they taken anything, have they traveled anywhere. Really get to know the patient and really get into those detective shoes. I think that was the lesson for me in that case. Always go back to the history. There'll be something there. There was another really interesting one. This was a immigrant woman who I saw after COVID. And her liver markers came through and they were through the roof. It looked like a typical hepatitis picture. ALT, ALP completely high, CRP through the roof. But she was fine. She was absolutely fine, systemically okay, not jaundiced. And then on talking to her, I just ended up asking, how are you? She bursts out crying. Poor thing, had been through so much. Turns out she was, as a coping strategy, chewing on raw rice. And she was doing this for years. So she'd been through a lot of trauma in her life. And some, you've heard of people using elastic bands or holding ice that can kind of cause a bit of acute kind of pain, but in a safer way to not self-harm. For her, it was chewing the raw rice. I think it was a feeling in the mouth, and then it became a habit, and then she couldn't get rid of it. So do you know that rice is high in raw rice, like unless you wash it, it's high in arsenic. She basically presented with arsenic poisoning and needed urgent hospital admission because she was on like the verge of like liver failure almost. Like she was so unwell by the time we saw her. And it all came down to this habit of having eaten bags and bags of raw rice as a coping mechanism for anxiety. And I don't know why the lab added an arsenic. I'm not sure. This is many years ago. But that was through the roof. And then because you think arsenic, what could it be in? I thought of raw pulses and rice. And that's when I asked her, have you been washing your rice? How do you wash your rice? And she's like, wash? I bag to mouth. There is no wash. I was like, excuse me? And then, it came out. That's how that came out. So yeah, it's a lot of detective work in primary care. Yeah.
And does that stress you out at times as well? When you kind of, when it's not so obvious, when you've kind of exhausted all the options, but the patient is, let's say, still in pain, and you don't really, you kind of get stuck.
I think stressed out is the wrong word, because you're so much in problem solving mode. You have to just, you're just in the, you're so focused on finding a solution. I don't think there's room for stress. It's more, okay, what do I do now? Do I speak to a colleague about it? Do I discuss it with a specialist in hospital? You know, you are alone, but you're not that alone as well. So I think there are lots of different avenues to try. I think I'm sure a lot of my colleagues are the same. There's no room for, there's no time to stress out. You just have to get on with it and think, okay, I've not tried this. What else can I try? Or you take a step back and think, okay, let me go back to the history and then come back and see the patient. But it's always such interesting things that you wouldn't have really thought about, you know. I once, again, similarly, there was this gentleman who presented with renal failure because he was having creatine he was taking off the internet that he'd bought off some dodgy dealer. You know, where are you getting your supplements from? Is it FDA approved? Is there research done on it? Just because someone on social media said, I take these supplements and I look like this, you know, you have to really watch what's happening, isn't it? So those are the challenges of finding out what your patients are up to and where are they getting this information. Yeah.
So it's more about the holistic approach in the panic.
It is. And, you know, because we were talking about diabetes, I've had patients who are diabetic and they've gone to these nutritionists who've put them on high protein diets and they've ended up with their EGFR dropping because these patients might already be in chronic kidney disease. You know, they may be CKD stage 3, stage 4. They might be borderline on dialysis. Your kidney can't, you know, you can't then give those kind of patients high protein because their kidneys can't really process it, and it's going to build up and it's going to cause strain on the organs. So you really have to go to a professional, accredited graduate who can show you the certificates. I'm a nutritionist specializing in this condition that I can give you advice. So that is a big one. Always telling people, don't just listen to anyone online.
That's also another important topic that you touched on, social media and how there's so many influencers that's giving diet tips and exercise tips. And, you know, that's for all the public, all the age groups. We have teenagers, we have young adults as well, who listens to these advices and kind of their health deteriorates, doesn't it?
Yeah. So you have to, I would just say, if you're listening to anyone online, you have to check, are they a qualified clinician? Are they still practicing? You know, because someone could have graduated years ago, but things change. Medicine is constantly changing and evolving, and now with AI, so much is changing, right? Are they practicing? Are they qualified? What is their experience? That's what I would check, and what they're talking about, you know. Yeah, that's what I would check.
Well, thank you so much for discussing so many important topics. I kind of went in with, okay, we're going to, like, you know, go through these topics, but when talking to you, we kind of went off on a tangent about so many different topics. So thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to seeing so many work that you're going to be doing, which is, I'm sure, going to be amazing for our community.
Thank you, Dona. And this was such a fun experience. Thank you for having me, to your team, and all the best with all the work you're doing too.
Thank you.